I'm Tyler J. Thomas, along with Jeff Moss, Tim Coleman, and the lovely Chris Huffstetler. We will discuss the ins and outs of starting a locksmith business. This is the Three Tumblers. Today's guest is a good friend of mine and one I talk to on a literal daily basis. Unlike all of my other friends, where we either apprenticed or were born into it, he actually got started from the ground up. Now, I've never asked his full story, so here's my chance. Chris, why in the hell did you pick locksmithing? And how in the hell did you get started in locksmithing?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Tyler. And that is a fantastic question. And yeah, unlike a lot of folks, I didn't exactly become a locksmith because it was in my lineage or because I'd worked for one. I kind of stumbled into the industry. Um, when I was about 16 years old, I had a long, courageous journey working as a arcade mechanic technician. So I fixed arcade games and pinball machines, and so I had a nice long history of working with small components and some soldering and things like that. And then I went to started going through college, and then I eventually was working towards a mechanical engineering degree. I fell in love and moved to Spokane, Washington, where I became a regional project manager for a big box retailer, traveling all over the Northwest and having fun building, remodeling, rearranging stores. And a buddy of mine was a locksmith, and he needed some help because he was completely overwhelmed with work, and he knew my history, my background, and then that led to taking that on as a little bit more part-time, which turned into me taking over all his contracts, which turned into my own business.
Pretty cool. That ruins my second point.
I like doing that.
Yeah, well, thank you. So out of the gate, when you started your business, you had at least some business already established. Something, it wasn't like you were starting from day one scratch. You had something, business was calling.
Kind of, not really. Most of it was mostly roadside work. So I was getting the Ajero calls. I was doing the unlocks. A few, I think maybe two property companies used me twice a month for rekeying some locks. So it was scraps basically. It was enough to keep my beak wet, but definitely not enough to satiate my hunger for more.
So then how did you make it beyond that? How did you pay the bills, so to speak? How did you start getting business out of the gate?
So along with mechanical experience, I had a really good knowledge of SEO, HTML coding. I was going for my Cisco networking certification when out of high school, and I really did understand how to tailor websites for marketing and for appeal. And so I kind of used that when I started developing my business. I wasn't just throwing cards out there. I was looking to see what's in the market, what's being offered, what's not being offered, and I found some plot holes basically where I could go in there and say, hey, these areas aren't being covered and these types of services and hours aren't available. So I really just looked to see what was happening, tailored it to make it look good for my clients, start out, and just hit the ground running.
And about how long was that from, final publishing, or at least getting it out there, to when you started getting calls?
Well, if you understand anything about Google and algorithm updates, and it changes every few years as far as how it's produced and done and accumulated. But usually a good website will take about 6 to 8 months to really seed itself for organic ranking. So I kind of had to make things work for the first year, basically. After about the first year, I started to really see, the first quarter was 10% increase, next quarter was 20% increase, and then it just kept going up and up and up. And after 10 plus years about now, it's been going good. After about the 2 year mark, it was a viable business.
So from the start, was it locksmith 100%, or were you augmenting it through other means, other jobs, other ventures?
It was locksmithing 100%.
Chris, Tyler and Jeff know you a lot better than I do, but is there like one specific area of locksmithing that you kind of dug into to start with, or did you kind of cover the whole gambit? I mean, I know you said that you did unlocks and stuff, but Was it mainly automotive or residential or commercial, or did you just jump into everything?
So having limited experience, having limited resources, and obviously limited tools, there was definitely a little bit of a gap. I wasn't doing automotive at first. I wasn't doing commercial really, except for some easy Reiki stuff. So my main powerhouse was all residential. That was a really heavy hitter for me. Residential and after-hour service. That made up about the after-hour service made up about 70% of my business for the first 2 years, because all the established guys, they close their doors at 5, they turn their phones off. So there was, on a good day, there were between 5 to 10 calls to be had between 5 o'clock and midnight.
Gotcha. What was it? This is just a side question, but what was it like the first time you had to do a fresh install of like a door closer or an exit device?
I'm a pretty precarious person when it comes to attach myself to something I'm not sure of. So a lot of research, a lot of bouncing ideas and knowledge off of people, and say, hey, just knowing that you can look at someone's experience and say, okay, you did something cool. What was the real pitfalls? Oh, I wish I would have used this bit. I wish I would have used this. I wish I would have not done this. And that was really important for me, is understanding different materials, different closers, and not everything's always going to be a clean footprint swap. Like, hey, I got an LC in this, and it's going to be another LC, and that's easy. A maintenance guy can do that. What's the point of being there? Being adaptive, thinking outside the box, those are really key components that, you can't train for that. You just have to kind of really have that mindset.
I agree completely.
Going back, knowing what you know now, if you were starting over from scratch day one again, but knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently?
I didn't have a van for the first 4 years of business. And my first van was a Dodge B2500, 1997, no heater, no AC. So if you live somewhere where it gets to be 0 degrees and somewhere where it gets to be 100 degrees, and it's not pleasant to drive around with a blanket on you, because that's all you can afford at the time and you're trying to make things work. I would have probably saved up a lot more. I would have probably prepared myself more with more tools, more resources, and more training, because I am a pretty much self-taught locksmith for most definition. I wish I would have probably started out with a bigger range of capabilities. There's still some things I don't do today, like safe and vault and SFIC, which is not a matter of knowledge, is a matter of, just doing it. But I would probably start out with a wider arsenal.
That's pretty cool. Is there something that you enjoy more now after 10 years than you did when you first started this?
The thing that I probably enjoy the most, just from an aesthetic and pleasing standpoint, is probably the really old antique mortise hardware. I really, really enjoy restoring some of that stuff. Compared to, car unlocks, I don't like to do them nearly as much, just because it's like a chore compared to like, hey, here's a 1910 Craftsman home and the engineer's plaque is next to the door. There's a connection to the hardware. You can clean it. You can, there's a lot of stuff you can do that really makes you feel connected to the job. Whereas an unlock, it's dirty, it's quick, you're in and out. It's just someone that appreciates architecture and art and things like that. That's what I enjoy the most, is seeing 100-year-old lock and knowing it's going to work better than anything on the shelf, really, and taking a new homeowner and explaining to them how things work and the artistry involved and all the cool stuff that goes with it.
Very cool.
I agree. That's the fun part.
Yeah, I do like taking something that's old, but still it will still work with the same TLC. You might have to take it apart and take every single piece and part out of it and clean it, with a rag and whatnot, and put it all back together. And you don't always have diagrams for like those old reading mortise locks that are out there, or
Tim, it's pronounced reading,
whatever.
Ready.
Some of those really old mortise locks out there, and you don't have a diagram to put it back together, so you really have to pay attention when you're taking it apart. So yeah, I can agree with that.
There's a lot of nuances.
I swear to God, if you don't stop fucking saying that.
All right, fine. I'll acquiesce.
All right. Yeah, Tim, keep this in there. Fuck both of y'all. Up next, Jeff is going to give us some insights to his entrepreneurial endeavors.
So, as many people know, locksmithing is a second career for me. I was in the IT field for a while, which started as a hobby, and when I was in school, and then I learned that people could pay you for that type of stuff. I was just doing wiring in my basement and just sort of figuring how things work. I had a classmate whose parents were doing some remodeling and they wanted some wiring put in, and they're still a customer to this day through where the guy where the father works through several different places. I still do stuff with them. So it's never been a full-time thing. I've always just, I guess the kids today would call it a side hustle. But through high school and college and taking care of a lot of the same people, mostly, residential computer repairs, but some small business networking, cabling, things like that. So, I've dealt with suppliers, had to set up a separate bank account, things like that. And, I still do maybe one or two small jobs a month. But when I decided that I didn't like what I was doing anymore, I thought that I might expand that business into locksmithing, because I had done some security camera jobs and things like that. And again, you think because you picked locks and you take stuff apart, well, I could do this. Well, there's a lot more involved, and I'm glad that I didn't do that. You have to get insurance and, more equipment, an actual inventory of stuff. And what do you do if you can't figure something out? So I'm glad that I made the decision to go work for an established company and learn, the ins and outs of the industry, and, with coworkers and a lot of other people that, are always willing to help and know a lot more than I do. So I guess I meant to discuss the first part, but if any of you have started a business, be curious to know, what it was, how you got started. Besides Chris, because we know you have, you started a locksmith business from scratch.
Well, I've never started one, but let me ask this now that you say that and I think about it. Chris, was there ever a time, because I had this time when I was an apprentice, where you were like, what the fuck am I doing? I shouldn't do this. This I'm over my head. I need to go back doing something else. Were you ever like, what the fuck am I doing here?
So yes, absolutely. There were a couple instances as I was still kind of raising my lock picking skills to be much better. You'd walk up to a house, she'd be like, please don't be a schleg, please don't be a schleg, and that's just what that was like the first 6 months, first year-ish, where you don't really know how to pick locks that great. You can shim all day. You're just hoping, please don't be a schleg deadbolt, please don't be, whatever. And I remember tool wise, I wasn't as equipped as I think I should have been, but I was using a Harbor Freight 12-volt drill for drilling out, bolts I've ever had to. If you've ever used a 12-volt drill, let alone a Harbor Freight brand 12-volt drill, and not understanding, how metallurgy works and the types of bits you should be using. So the first year was a lot of growing pains. I remember having to cold chisel a deadbolt one time, and it was 20 below zero outside. And so, yeah, you have to really put in work with half the pay, it felt like. But there was, for the first year or two, it was just, do I want to do this? Do I want to keep doing this? Is it worth it? And then you go out and unlock a car, at 10 o'clock for $150. Like, well, that's 10 hours of minimum wage. Okay, we're fine.
Yeah.
When I first got my license, and I wasn't sure. Like around here, most all the locksmiths that I was familiar with, they had their own little shops, their own little, territories and fiefdoms, for lack of a better term. They were either family run and they only hired family members, or they were like, hey, I'll teach you everything I know if you buy my shop from me. Well, shit, I was just getting started. I didn't know, I didn't have that kind of money. For one thing, coming out of law enforcement, you don't have any money. And for two, why am I going to spend, $10, $20, $50,000 to buy a small one-man show, with a truck and some inventory? And hopefully once the check cleared, the guy didn't just up and RUNNOFT, that I could just, learn from somebody and be taught on the job. that's kind of the mindset where I was. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to start my own business. And thank God I didn't actually try to do that. I probably, well, for one, we would not be having this podcast. And for two, I would not have my YouTube channel. I would not put myself out there on social media ever again, because you learn so much from working with someone. And I know that there are some people out there who do really great starting their own business straight off, but you kind of have to know your subject matter. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next block. But yeah, I mean, I'm just really glad that I didn't try to start my own business from scratch.
Well, that's why Chris is insane. Jeff, keep going.
So that's really all I had on those two things. Same as what Tim said, there's just so much out there that you don't know, and trying to do it by yourself will be pretty difficult. Okay, up next, Tim will share why it can behoove you to start out with someone else before going out on your own.
Like Jeff said, trying to get into locksmithing from scratch can be a real bitch, even if you know how to pick and rekey. Thankfully, I avoided that pitfall and went to work for a good shop, and now I've learned how a locksmith shop should run. Well, at least if you want to make money and keep your business going. If you've never worked as a locksmith before, you really don't know how to locksmith, and by extension, you really don't know how a locksmith shop should run. Knowing your subject matter and how jobs are done, what details are involved with doing certain jobs and tasks is very, very important. Tyler, when you were working on the road before, or even in your current spot, knowing the actual hands-on part of what should be done is pretty important when it comes to pricing, right?
Yeah,
like making money and running your business.
Yeah, being the guy that the first shop I learned with, they were real sticklers and pains in the ass as far as getting paid on time. They weren't very good about the rest of it, but that one little lesson stuck with me. And whether you're starting from scratch, whether you're doing it after the fact, learning and becoming a business after you work for somebody, and it was like, that's a good lesson to learn. Being a pain in the ass as far as getting paid. And I guess we've discussed that with our text messages every day and week about what I'm going through right now and have gone through in the past, as far as making sure you're getting paid and then hassling if you don't. Chris, you ever experienced anything like that? I mean, I say I text Jeff and Tim that, but I'm also texting you and Josh that as well.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a couple core principles you learn from having crappy bosses and crappy coworkers and good coworkers. And there's one of those principles is, like you just said, you have to be aggressive, because it's easy for people just to say, hey, I got your invoice, and they never get back to you, or they forget about it, or gets kicked up to the ladder, or goes to accounting, over corporate 10 states away. I always write my invoices immediately after jobs are done for clients and accounts, just so I don't forget any details, key code information, whatever it's going to be. And yeah, you got to be aggressive. You have to be cordial. There's a very good amount of balancing between being professional and being aggressive, being a dick, but being polite because you want their business. But your business, you have to get paid. You have your own bills to pay, and that's something that you can't just falter on and say, oh, it's been 45 days. Maybe I'll call them. We'll see. Like, you have to set boundaries for your customers, and you have to make sure they follow them.
Absolutely. Jeff, what say you?
I mean, there's so much stuff that's done in the background, administratively, that, invoicing, accounting, bookkeeping, all that stuff, to have to do all that by yourself, you'd go crazy.
Absolutely. And
You got to keep the office people happy. That's important.
even if you are the office people, you got to keep yourself happy.
Yeah, but that, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, that makes it a lot tougher,
It does.
if it's just you.
Yep, absolutely. And so I'm kind of segueing into my next point, but Chris, I've got a question for you. If you had worked for say a good, reputable, busy locksmith shop for, I don't know, a year or two before you went out on your own, how do you think things would have been different in your career?
Good question. I think that would have had more awareness of the different scope of jobs I would be capable of. I probably been trained better to handle different different degrees of job difficulty. I would probably have more experience and more advanced tools. But also at the same time, if I don't have the business, that's cool if you can install 15 CO100s in one day, but if you don't have the clients, it doesn't really matter yet. So I mean, it's the best sailors are proven on rough seas, and that's kind of where I was thrust into. So maybe not having the experience was a blessing in disguise for me. It was very much a sink or swim scenario, and I think that if I would have had more of a cushy landing, it probably would have deterred me from trying as hard.
You get like 10 Three Tumblers points because you're the first guest that we've had that have mentioned on their own a CO100. And that's like my favorite keypad lock to install. So awesome.
What do you get? What do you get with your points?
Absolutely nothing. The points are made up and the rules don't matter.
He mentions that, but I wonder, we see all these people, Chris, Wayne, other people like that have made it and have done pretty well for themselves. But how many people have failed and we don't hear about it? How many people have failed and we don't hear their lessons and learn from that?
You mean the guy who has 12 different businesses, but 10 of them have failed and he doesn't,
Yeah, I mean, we hear the successes, but we don't hear about the failures and what we could glean from that. So we hear what Wayne and what Chris and what Josh and everybody else have done, but we don't learn the lessons that have doomed others. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would love to hear those stories. I mean, honestly, I don't want to bring anybody on to the show that is unwilling, and certainly if they were willing, we would want to do it in a dignified way, but I would love to hear from at least one person who started their own locksmith business and it fell flat after a year or two.
Welcome to Three Tumblers. How screwed up is your life? Tell us all about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever get that though, because just the way society is now as far as humility. But I mean, as successful people share their secrets, unsuccessful people sharing their secrets, or at least how they got that way, equally important, I guess.
Well, as the writer and editor, and I'm sure our executive producer will back me up on this, I would like to extend an all expenses paid invitation for anybody who has failed in locksmithing, starting their own business, to guest on our show. It is free to join Zoom and be recorded, but
Anomaly.
We'll cover it. Chris, anything that you have to add, like as far as somebody who I don't know, is kind of in that in between where they know what they don't know, but they have a good opportunity to work for a good shop? Would you say go for the good shop, or would you say go on your own?
So the rewarding portion of being a lone wolf is amazing. The successes are yours, but the failures are also yours. You own everything, whether it's the flat tire, it's the ad campaign you left on while you're on vacation and cost you $700, which I haven't done yet, but I've heard stories, all the way to, the client that you forgot about and didn't show up for one day because you were busy with 10 other things. But the best part to me, and the most important part, is that when you are self-employed, we're an entrepreneur, you are 100% on your own. And that is the most character building portion of business ownership I ran into. I've worked for people, I've managed teams, but I've found that the most rewarding thing for me was running my own business.
Cool.
Yeah.
I will add, before we close out this block, I'll add that the second locksmith that I interviewed with is based like 10 minutes up the street from me. And he and I had a phone conversation about 30 minutes long when I was still working full-time police, but I had my date that I needed to be doing something else by. And anyway, he and I talked for like 30 minutes or so. And I said, hey, just to let you know, I put in email to such and such shop and also to this shop. And he said, really? He said, that's the shop that I worked for 10 years before I started my own business. Wound up having an interview with that shop. I said, that's where I want to go to work. That's where I still work. And a few days after I had that interview, I called this guy back and I said, hey man, I just wanted to give you the courtesy and let you know that I accepted a job at, the shop that you started at. And he said, dude, you're going to learn so much there. You're going to learn a lot more than I could teach you. And you're going to be awesome. And basically, he and my boss and I now, we all get along really well. If he needs parts that we have, we'll help him out, vice versa. He's really, really great guy. And I think that that's something also to learn, is that you can start off somewhere and then after a period of time, you can branch off to your own. Maybe a happy middle ground there between not risking absolutely everything that you have out the gate, but also having something to look forward to. Well, we've carried on for a while now, talking all business, but I'm kind of tired of that. So let's just talk about some random stuff that's happened this week.
Between Tyler and I, we have 7 spare kids. So I'm sure it'll be a welcome change to just talk about 4 spare parts. Tyler, you want to chime in on that?
I was paying attention to the Russian Civil War, which is apparently done now, so I don't have anything to say.
How about you, Mr. Jeff?
Got to see one of my good friends from college today. He was in town running sound for a community festival, and when I was there, they had a very dynamic polka band, but they don't just play polka, they do cover songs. They mostly do polka style cover songs. It was very interesting, different.
Weird Al Yankovic stuff.
You stole it from me, Tyler.
Kind of, but I'll have to get the name of the band. It was cool.
Only in Ohio. How about you, Tim?
Just actually got back a few hours ago from the Southern Lock Show down in St. Petersburg, Florida. Great classes. The show was okay. Wound up with a free sample lock. Yeah, it was a good time.
Did you get any swag for your fellow compatriots?
I got a little bit. They were actually pretty light on swag this year. It was disappointing.
That is disappointing. Locksmiths need free shit.
Yeah.
I have my hand sanitizer from Just Cars back in 2018. I just came across the other day. My swag bag.
I still have the bag here of stuff from Aloha last year.
It's always either the hot, dry city or the hot, wet city in the summer. I myself, I dealt with a customer who was power of attorney over property, and they were looking to liquidate a bunch of stuff, and I came home with some of the sweetest vinyl records this side of the Mississippi today.
I saw them, and I'm trying to buy them from them.
Tyler, I showed you my original collection of Styx and AC/DC and Led Zeppelin vinyl.
He's got all that. He's got Foreigner. He's got Journey.
Chris, we'll have to get a separate. Have to get a picture of what you got.
I'm telling you, man. Some of the, and these are all in their original packaging with the protective sleeves, and someone with a stickler, but now they're dead. So congrats to me. So it's summertime. What's the big plan here? You guys just gonna mosey on through the season? Or you guys got any big things coming up here?
Well, as of right now, since I'm the editor, I have to say that I am halfway through the callbacks episode as far as editing right now. That will come out 3 episodes prior to this one. So we're covered for like the next month or so, but I think we plan on recording when we can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going anywhere this summer.
I don't like to leave my house, so it works well.
Also, the lake. The weather's been so weird here. It's going to take like another 6 months for the lake to warm up. So it'll probably be like next month before I go out on the boat. So yeah, I'll be around.
Welcome to my world. It can be 90 degrees outside, but the lakes are not sustainably warm until probably August. So for the month of August, and they get cold again.
As always, if you have any hate mail or love letters for us, write them on the back of a $20 bill and email it to the Three Tumblers pod at gmail.com. That is 3 spelled out, so the THREE Tumblers pod at gmail.com, or tag us on Twitter, which we've recently gotten very active on, at 3 Tumblers pod. In this case, 3 is the number 3, so at 3 Tumblers pod. Executive producer, that's me, Tyler J. Thomas. Technical producer is Jeff Moss. Writer and editor is Tim Coleman, back from Florida. Welcome back. Glad you didn't die. Guest host today was Chris Huffstetler. Our bean counter, Ed Ameme. Love that. Chief accountant is Candace B. Ritenoff. Guest accommodations provided by Horseshoe Road Inn.
The Horseshoe Road Inn.
Yeah. Fuck you and the Horseshoe Road Inn on. And our chief legal counsel is Hugh Lewis Dewey of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe, otherwise known to entrepreneurs everywhere as Huey Louie Dewey.
Eat more cheese.
Lockjaw Manufacturing.
Oh, we didn't give him a shout out. Chris, go ahead and do it real quick.
Lockjaw Manufacturing, lockjawmfg.com. Shameless plug, here we go. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's all taken by us, Lockjaw MFG. Accessory, gear, some tools, stickers, apparel. You like locks, we love you. Locks for lock pickers, lock enthusiasts, hobbyists, and just cool people. Check us out.
I'm Florida man.
He's Florida man. This has been a Three Tumblers production, season 1, copyright 2023, all rights reserved. Find this episode and others wherever you get your podcasts.
Since when did we actually just stick with 3 words for the final 3 words? That was just a suggestion.
Sometimes. Rip.
Cool.
Well, I'm jelly.
Florida man.
Host- RoboCop.